Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we are going to be talking about Atomic Mass Games, Star Wars Legion, Star Wars Shatterpoint, and is there trouble in paradise, or am I just overreacting? That is the theme of today's video. I normally never, ever draw sensationalized conclusions based on information. That never ever happens on this channel, and it won't happen today, but just in case it does, I want to preface this with there are some things that I am concerned about. I'm going to try to balance those. I'm going to try to talk about them, and it certainly may be nothing, but it may not be. And hopefully, I really do hope that I'm wrong about some of these things, but I wanted to share them with you and get some of your opinions on what's going on with Atomic Mass Games right now, and things like Shatterpoint and Star Wars Legion. Is there cause for concern? Is there anything to be worried about? Because, frankly, I'm worried about a few things, but I might be overreacting, at least on some of it. But there's definitely some things to be worried about. And hopefully we can sort of separate the what is from what could be in this video. We are also still doing that $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. There's still time left to enter to win that. If you want to have a chance to enter to win that $25 Amazon gift card giveaway, which you can put towards a game or gaming expansion of your choice, all you have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. If you want a chance for more giveaways, we do stuff in Patreon all the time. And we also do stuff in Discord. And any of the social media links I have, we're going to have links for those all down in the video description below. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the backstory that has led me to this point. It kind of all goes back to the beginning when Atomic Mass Games took over all of the Star Wars games. There definitely seems to be a favoritism for Marvel Crisis Protocol over all of the games that came from Fantasy Flight. Fast forward to them canceling X-Wing and Armada. That was a pretty big surprise for a lot of people, especially the X-Wing community. Armada sort of saw the writing on the wall, but X-Wing did not. And that was a big surprise, especially since they had already pledged to reprint all of the X-Wing ships, or most of the X-Wing ships, in the new the black box standard. And there were scheduled reprints that were in the works with new standard loadouts. Everything, there was stuff that was in the queue to be printed and delivered and all of that stuff. When that cancellation came, Asmodee also was settled with a ton of debt from Embracer Group, which then all of their companies are beholden to fulfill. So that puts profit generation and profit maximization at an all-time high. So that puts a lot of pressure on these companies like Atomic Mass Games. And it's not just Atomic Mass Games, it's all of these companies like Fantasy Flight, Z-Man Games, Atomic Mass Games, etc. A lot of, Asmodee is a huge company. They have lots and lots of board games underneath them, a lot of different studios. AMG is just one of those studios. So while all of the debt is not exclusive to Atomic Mass Games, they still share the burden of having to maximize profits to pay off this debt. Why is that important? Well, that led to the cancellation of certain games that were underperforming. I say underperforming not as a discredit to those games, but as far as how much profit you can generate. A single shipping container full of Star Wars Legion product is going to net you a lot more revenue than a single shipping container of Star Wars Armada product, which had additional costs of having to be assembled in a factory and pre-painted and washed and sealed and all of that stuff in a factory. So a lot more costs that go into manufacturing those things, and to make the profits the same, it's one of these deals where the cost would have had to have been, significantly higher per unit, which may have led to less sales, so on and so forth. But we are still seeing significant increases in prices, and like with the new Star Wars Legion products that have been coming out, they're at an all-time high as far as their costs, which is, of course, understandable. We've had inflation. We've seen that they have a lot of debt to pay off, but their prices are still in the same ballpark as other miniatures games, although that kind of is contrary to one of the things that used to be a nice appeal to Star Wars Legion, and that it was, half the cost of similar stuff for Warhammer, for example, and now it's about the same. So we've seen that. It certainly points towards AMG having debt that they need to pay off. Okay, that's fine. That is what it is. Not really a criticism. It's just a bullet point leading to where I'm going. So lately, they've also pledged to redo the entire line of Star Wars Legion products in the new hard plastic, which means new sculpts for everything, new art style, new boxes, multi-language packs, all of this stuff, a whole new rule set, a whole new edition that they won't call an edition, which is a whole separate subject. But it seemed like Atomic Mass Games was really pledging the long-term support for Star Wars Legion, and that was a very, very good thing. However, there have been some hiccups that go along with that. Doesn't necessarily mean that the future of Star Wars Legion is in jeopardy. I think what is in jeopardy as a result of this transition is the present of Star Wars Legion. And what I mean by that is I talked about this in a recent video, that Legion's product is not being reprinted because it's the current product. It's all in the old art style, has the old box art, it has the old logo on there, it has old card styles, it has objectives that you can't use anymore, and a lot of that sort of thing. So all of that is not being reprinted anymore, which means everything that sells out is gone forever. And a lot of stuff was already sold out when they started to do this stuff. So but before they even started doing this, they canceled reprints, which means a lot of things that were already overdue were never going to get a reprint, aren't getting reprints, are never going to get a reprint, not until they eventually get around to doing them in the new hard plastic, in the new Legion 2nd edition sort of format. And that's a problem because more than half of the Legion's stock is out of stock, or at least I should say it was. And it is, but they're trying... I talked about this recently in another video. And on the Asmodee website, I want to say last week or so, when I talked about it last, it was like 48 items in stock, 48 items out of stock. And those numbers have changed in a peculiar way, in that it's showing only 46 in stock, which means there's less items in stock, but somehow now it's more than half of the Legion product is available. So it's a little bit misleading because it sort of puts them over this high watermark of, oh, we have more than half of our product in that's available, and it kind of sends a false message if you look at that in a glance, because even the 48 and 48 was discounting stuff that had already been removed. That doesn't exist anymore. So they continually not only mark things out of stock, but also are removing things from the Asmodee store altogether, which is strange, and it's interesting to me. It doesn't mean a whole lot. It could just mean that they're, creating new listings for new products as they're going to come in. One of the things that's no longer there is Princess Leia, and that's fine because she's already been earmarked as being one of the things that's being reprinted in the new edition. She's going to be part of like a Rebel Leader cell thing. So that's fine. But there's other things that have been removed from the store that haven't been marked as being reprinted, like Fleet Troopers and things like that. So there's some disturbing things, and this also mirrors a similar trend that X-Wing and Armada faced when they had product disappearances from the Asmodee store right before they were abruptly canceled, seemingly out of nowhere, which is a little bit worrisome. So this is where I get into no, this is fine because there's a reason that they should be doing this, but at the same time, that's the angel on my shoulder. And then the devil on my shoulder says, well, yeah, but that was the exact same situation that happened just a few months ago with X-Wing and Armada. So that's why I'm trying to lay this out with the facts versus the what ifs. But there's more. There's a lot more that we're going to talk about. Retailers and a lot of stores and communities that I've talked to. Everybody seems to be reporting that that out of all of their games, Marvel Crisis Protocol is actually the only one that's doing all right as far as sales. And I can understand why Legion is selling poorly, and a big part of that is that there's much less product. Existing players can certainly find new expansions of things when they come out, but if you were looking for like B2s, or if you were trying to start a new faction, you're trying to get into Separatists, you want to get your B2 super battle droids, you want to get a tank, a saber tank for the Republic or whatever, it limits your expandability of an existing player for certain older models that you can't get. Also, with the lack of the Battle Force boxes, the lack of a lot of the starters and a lot of that entry point stuff. You want to play Empire, you want to get into that, and maybe you wanted Shore Troopers or things like that. Things that are very popular, things that are common, things that are good and desirable. A lot of the larger tanks and vehicles have also been sold out forever, are not getting reprinted. At least not publicly. They haven't announced that these are getting reprinted. And typically when something gets announced, there's like a 2-year window at this point. So that's one of the reasons that I'm worried. They've already announced some of these reprints like a year and a half ago, and we still haven't seen them. And who knows when they're actually going to come out? A lot of it should start coming out in the next couple of months. I imagine there'll be some previews at Adepticon. We're going to get some more news at Adepticon, and it is going to be an excellent opportunity for AMG to address some of these concerns, and I'm hoping that they do. But of course, it doesn't only stop there. Shatterpoint is doing poorly, MCP is doing well, and Shatterpoint doing poorly is also another interesting thing, because that's one of AMG's actual homegrown games. That's one of their own games. It's one of the games that they created. It's one of their babies, right? And it doing poorly is interesting to me, because it's in some ways it's a direct competitor with Legion, because it's like a dudes on a map. They're slightly different scales, so the Shatterpoint stuff is bigger. But it always seemed very strange to me that they'd want to support two competing game lines at the exact same time, while dismissing all of their spacefaring games, which were a completely different theater and didn't compete with any of their other games at all. So that was always bizarre to me. But also, while I initially liked Shatterpoint the first time I played it, I think the more I played it, the more sort of disenfranchised I got with it, because it didn't feel like it was a real gaming system. It seemed like it was more of just a miniatures line. So if you just like to paint miniatures, it's great, because Shatterpoint objectively has beautiful miniatures. It just has really poor and unrewarding gameplay from my perspective, especially for a skirmish game. Now, this is totally my opinion. Some people definitely disagree with me. Some of you watching may very much enjoy Shatterpoint, and if you do, I'm very glad that you enjoy it, because it's a different style of game. To me, it plays more like a board game, an area control board game, where you're just pushing people around, and that's fine. If that's the type of game that you like, that's great. That's not what I want from a skirmish game, from a war game, from guys, when you have dudes on the map with giant guns and lightsabers, and nobody can die. I say nobody can die. Nobody does die. It's possible, but you kind of have to let your dudes die almost deliberately if somebody's actually going to die. And the fact that Anakin Skywalker can't kill a B1 just drives me crazy. So to me, Shatterpoint doesn't actually feel like a game. It just feels like a line of models. And so also there's a sort of a market weirdness to it, that it also applies to MCP, that you can't really buy more than one of anything, because there's no incentive to, there's no reason to, unless you just want extra models for the sake of it, or you want to do conversions and things like that. Whereas Legion, should be doing much better, because hey, these stormtroopers, I want 6 of them because I can run 6, and now with this new version, you can run double of a lot of those units. So now you can be like, oh, I need to buy 12, and then for B1s, oh, I need to buy 118 B1 models or whatever. So there's a whole lot of dumping money into Star Wars Legion that seems like that should be their top priority, but lately it hasn't been. Which, fast forward, we're getting into the other part of this story, seemingly on the heels of people reporting that Shatterpoint sales have been doing very poorly, and that like certain Adepticon events aren't filling up for Shatterpoint. Of course, that's not necessarily indicative of like markets and kitchen table players around the country. They have gone on a social media posting sort of explosion lately with Shatterpoint. And granted, they have Atomic Mass Games has posted about Legion. They posted about Marvel Crisis Protocol. Historically, it always feels to me like they post 2 or 3 times as much Marvel Crisis Protocol as they ever did anything Star Wars. And then until Star Wars Shatterpoint came out, and then there's been a lot of Star Wars Shatterpoint stuff too. But I've always seen from the types of painting projects that they do, and the things that they share, and their social media presence, and the things they show attention to, they've always showed a lot more care to Marvel Crisis Protocol and Shatterpoint than to any of the other games. It's almost like Legion isn't their game, so they didn't care. One example of this is they set up social media groups. They set up Facebook groups. they set up a Marvel Crisis Protocol group. And, if you had a Marvel Crisis Protocol group, I know some people that were like contacted and, told to rename it. They couldn't call it Marvel Crisis Protocol. I had set up a Star Wars Shatterpoint group. And that I made, like as soon as they announced Shatterpoint, I had created a Star Wars Shatterpoint group. And I was immediately hit with like an inbox from their marketing department threatening potential legal action if I didn't change the name. Because they had the Star Wars Shatterpoint. I had to make it the unofficial group, of which, of course, immediately all my members left because they're just like, well, I don't want to be in the unofficial group. I want to. So basically, it's like you need to rename your group and make it sound terrible so people come to our group, for Shatterpoint. But they never did that for Star Wars Legion. So if there was an existing group for one of the other games, there was just like, no. Now, granted, I know that there's some of the people who are running Legion are very friendly with Atomic Mass Games right now, and that's fine. But they didn't like send a cease and desist or anything like that. They didn't do that with Armada. They didn't do that with X-Wing. They didn't set up, administratively run, communities for those games because it just never felt like they really cared about them in the same way. Now, of course, whether or not they cared, that's my opinion. But the fact is they didn't do that. They have 2 Facebook groups that they run and have like mods and that are official, official AMG groups for these games. And those 2 games are Marvel Crisis Protocol and Shatterpoint. They don't have one for Star Wars Legion. There is a Star Wars Legion group, but it is not owned and operated by Atomic Mass Games. So, those are just the facts. I obviously have opinions based on that. But that's just the way it is. So, which leads me to their recent social media explosion, because since the new year, they've been in the habit of typically posting, once every couple of days and sometimes every other day or sometimes every day. But in the span of 24 hours, they made not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 Star Wars Shatterpoint posts. This is way higher. It was like 4 of them were all within, I want to say 2 or 3 hours of each other, which really started to send off alarms. And then early the next day, there was a 5th one. So that's where I get the span of 24 hours. Really in the span of like, I think 3 or 4 hours for the first 4. And then the 5th one came afterwards. And now I had talked to some people in the Star Wars Legion community on, and I've been assured by certain Discord moderators and stuff that this is fine. It's just marketing doing this stuff, and it certainly well may be. But I have hot takes, and I'm going to give them to you now. So first off, some of these are totally normal and expected. There's 3 of these are new product announcements, which were all happening at the same time. Okay, that's fine. I've been told by some people that these were in response to certain leaks that happened, so they had to go ahead and announce it. And I'm like, that's fine, but they still control when they do that. And to drop 5 all at once, it makes me think, wow, the reports about Shatterpoint not selling from multiple other retailers, large retailers, big businesses that I've seen, YouTube channels, podcasts, I've seen it from a lot of places. The Star Wars Shatterpoint is struggling. And I've heard it from insiders and people behind the scenes and stuff. And, so if it was just like 1 or 2 sources, I could say it's just rumor, but it's been so many that it's, certainly I believe it. The other thing is, okay, there's some new product in here, but then they're doing, one of the posts that they made was that they're going to be doing in-store demos for Star Wars Shatterpoint, and I'm like, okay. That's really strange to be doing those now, years after. Like, it just seems like it's a massive push to get people interested in Shatterpoint, which, again, if you have a game that's failing, I don't blame them for doing that. You should be doing a big push to get it. That's a good thing. This isn't an attack. This is just my observations. And then the next day, this is the part where I get a little more annoyed. And that is that they make this post about, hey, here's how to make awesome terrain for Star Wars Shatterpoint. And it's exclusively Star Wars Legion vehicles, most of which are out of stock. Most of which have been out of stock and are not getting reprinted. So there's a little part of me that sees like a crushed up saber tank, and I was like, or destroyed, AAT and things like that. I'm like, oh man, they're destroying things that you just can't get anymore, So, And it's not Atomic Mass that did this. It was done by a third party. It was part of a series of things, and so I understand that they do things like this. This is stuff that they've done. But when you're showing, Legion vehicles that are being labeled as Star Wars Shatterpoint terrain, it's very strange to me for a number of reasons. Because if you go to the article, and if you check on Atomic Mass Games' social media feed, you're going to see, you can find the link, and you can go check out there. And to be fair, it's a good article. There's some excellent work done with these as far as you trying to destroy vehicles and paint them up, and it looks good. This guy did an amazing job with this stuff. And fortunately, to his credit, at one point in this article that he's written, he did say that he was sent some Star Wars Legion kits from AMG to be destroyed and turned into this terrain. But it's foreshadowing, because they don't list Star Wars Legion. Atomic Mass Games doesn't say Star Wars Legion at all during all of this, even though it's all Legion stuff. And it looks like the imagery here, to me, this is my opinion, but it looks like it's foreshadowing that they're trying to rebrand Legion stuff as Shatterpoint. And again, some of the stuff came out looking great. It looks very, very good, but you can't play Shatterpoint on this terrain. It's something you put on the side that maybe could give somebody cover. But this is not even... I mean, I've played Shatterpoint enough to know that you need flat, wide walkways for large base characters to be able to try to move and push each other back and contest objectives on. Stuff like this doesn't really work with Shatterpoint. That's one of the big reasons why Shatterpoint's so undesirable for me, because it's not a terrain game. It's you have to use the terrain that comes in the core box, because everything about it is designed for very, very specific bridges and overlapping, overhangs and scaffolding and stuff like that. It just doesn't work with normal terrain. Outside of that just being scatter terrain on the outside. This is very expensive scatter terrain. And so and these don't have, for most of these don't have flat enough places for a model to even stand, let alone to move or to place an objective on. There are a few that have some, that he basically broke a flat panel off of and created an area for maybe one smaller model to stand on. But Shatterpoint terrain requires very, very different stuff. So this is all very, it's beautiful stuff. It's very artsy. But it does stink to see what might have been the very last saber tank on the planet get sent to somebody for destruction, which I thought was pretty funny and interesting. But that's the way it is. So this is where my hot takes come in that it's definitely an extreme take to say, oh, this is foreshadowing. This is them saying Legion is just trash that you should use to fuel your Shatterpoint terrain. Destroy your Legion stuff so you can play more Shatterpoint. That's the message that the devil on my shoulder is hearing. And let me know if you agree, or if you at least understand. And if you disagree, do you at least understand why I see that imagery when I see stuff like this? Again, the article talks about this is how you can destroy your Legion stuff to make Shatterpoint terrain. When I don't think anybody who plays Shatterpoint seriously is going to do this. Not only that, but since most of this stuff is out of stock, you can't even do this. So why even market this, to sell product that doesn't exist anymore? It's so bizarre to me. I just don't know what's going on with AMG. And this is why I'm are they in trouble right now? Because there's been so many Shatterpoint posts all at once. And considering the favoritism that they've shown MCP and Shatterpoint over the sort of, the refugee games from Fantasy Flight Games, it does make me have some concern for Star Wars Legion. So why am I concerned about Star Wars Legion right now? Obviously, them destroying some vehicles doesn't mean that they're going to cancel Star Wars Legion. The facts are they have announced a whole big, awesome, a big, powerful, but lacking. I won't call it awesome because it needs more. But there's a roadmap for Legion. They've given a roadmap that goes through 2026, and presumably it will be filled out with even more stuff at this next Adepticon. There needs to be a lot more reprints coming because so much stuff is out of stock. It's getting harder and harder for people to find anything for Legion that they need. especially new players who, if they can't get into the game, are going to gravitate towards something else. So that certainly puts Legion at risk. And if it's going to take them years to get everything reprinted, of course, it does seem like, well, I think they only announced like 7 expansions for the reprints, and it's already taken them, like they said, this was like a 2-year process. So hopefully they can do it faster than that. But either way, I think Legion's in for a rough time ahead for new players coming in and for existing players, because there's a split. Because if you're a new player that has everything you need for your army, then maybe you don't really care as much about the reprints. Maybe you're going to be more focused on new stuff, of which there's probably going to be less new stuff, because again, if their priority has to be on getting all the old things reprinted, that means that there's less resources to make new stuff. Again, you can only have factories produce so many models in a given time period, so that's certainly something that's going to impact things. So veteran players are going to be impacted by that. New players are going to be impacted by the lack of immediate product availability. If it's going to be at least 2 more years before we have the entire line reprinted, it could be more than that. Again, you're talking about like 48 or 50 something expansions worth of product that need to be reprinted to kind of fill up the catalog. And that's just the stuff that's out of stock now. That doesn't even account for the things that are going to be out of stock next week or next month. Those also need to be reprinted. All of the fairly new stuff, minus the most 3 recent expansions, all of the fairly new stuff is also going to come out of stock at some point, like the Ewoks and the Shadow Collective and all of that stuff is also going to be out of stock and need to be reprinted. All of that stuff too, as it falls out of stock, will now also be unavailable. So all of those things need to be reprinted. That could take a lot more than 2 years. That could take 5 years. It could, I don't know. I don't have an exact timetable because I don't know how much they're sending to the printer. Because again, they also said that they wanted to resculpt pretty much everything. I mean, the fact that Grievous is getting a whole new sculpt. Now, I don't know if they're resculpting 100%. There may be some things that they say, no, we can send this back as is, just with the new box. I think if that wasn't their plan, I think that's something they're going to probably end up having to do. And I don't see a huge problem with that because a lot of them have great sculpts. There's probably a couple of things that could stand to get a better sculpt. Like Leia and Han were two of the things that I wanted to see resculpts on the most. But there's definitely opportunities to do more. Hopefully, when they do a saber tank, you've got. You can get like Plo Koon and Ayla Secura as little stand-ins to go into the top of that, kind of like they did with the ATST and stuff like that. Maybe there's going to be some quality of life improvements as reprints get announced and start coming out. So there was definitely a roadmap for Legion's progress. But where I worry is the timing of all of this. I think objectively that it would have been smarter to get your reprints, get everything coming, and then announce the second edition, or announce the new edition. Oh, and everything is up for pre-order right now, and it's coming out next month. Have it quicker. Or maybe not next month, but maybe within the quarter. I don't think you should have had more than 3-month window before announcing all of this. It's one of those things where, I don't think they rolled it out well enough. I don't like that they said, okay, all of your objectives are now instantly trash. You need all your battle cards are garbage now, unless you want to play the old version. New stuff, it's all print and play. This is now the way you have to play, and the physical stuff won't be out for a very, very long time. I don't like print and play for a game that wasn't print and play from the beginning because it feels very cheap and it makes me think bad things. It sends that little devil on my shoulder into kind of a panic mode where it's like, oh my gosh, if they're doing print and play, that means they're not taking it seriously. If they're doing it this way, it means they're not taking it seriously. And if they're not taking it seriously, then what else didn't they take seriously? They didn't take Armada seriously. They didn't take X-Wing seriously. And X-Wing brings up the other good point. Even though they have a roadmap for Legion, they also had a roadmap for X-Wing. The assault gunboat was announced for reprints at the same time as the Outrider, the Dash Rendar YT-2400 expansion. That one had come out, but the gunboat hadn't come out yet. It was still in the queue. It was due for an update any minute now, and we started to be like, how come they haven't announced any news on the gunboat? Where's that? And they also said they were doing everything else. They were going to be redoing the entire line of Star Wars X-Wing, with maybe one or two exceptions of things that were broken. Might see some adjustments. We saw some changes to the YT-2400 when they reprinted that. But they had long-term plans for X-Wing. They were doing standard loadouts. They were doing card packs for it. It was cheap for them to do cardboard for it. And I think that's the only reason that they kept doing it. But they were going to do reprints for everything. And they started. And they had announcements. They had the assets done. They had the art assets done. They released stuff. I think they're doing some promos. They even had promos for these things printed that are going to be at Worlds. Promos like standard loadouts for the assault gunboat. Thing that never got made. But they had done promos for. Right, so again, they had plans. They had a roadmap for X-Wing, admittedly not as significant as the Legion roadmap. The Legion roadmap is far more significant, but because they've done it already, makes me wonder if maybe it could happen again. That's where the panic. Maybe I'm overreacting. Of course, it could happen again. Does that mean it will? And this is where I have to kind of back up a little bit and say, well, does 5, Facebook posts in a row equate to we're going out of business sale? Of course not. It's certainly a rush of Facebook posts that probably could have been spaced out a little bit better, but that could have been as simple as, big businesses like this don't necessarily just make every post manually, like you sit at the computer and enter and send it. A lot of times they have these things managed through some kind of software. This is scheduled to go live tomorrow. I do the same thing with my YouTube videos. I don't make them all at 7 o'clock in the morning. I usually make them the night before or a couple of days in advance and things like that. And I schedule them to go live at certain points, usually at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time each weekday. So that's kind of how I do. But I've made mistakes before where it went live instantly and I didn't mean it to. So maybe they did something like that with their Facebook posts where things, maybe an intern took over. I don't know. It could have been anything like that. There's a lot of explanations for all of the stuff that's happened. But here's what I do know. When they gave us the roadmap, they also had plans for X-Wing. The debt has happened. Plans could have been changed. So I'm going to be paying very close attention to what they talk about at Adepticon. And I do hope that they recognize that there are some worries and concerns. And even if it doesn't mean that the future of Legion is at risk of it, it might not mean that Legion is at risk of being canceled or anything like that. But I think it definitely spells that unless they can really get reprints prioritized and sped up, that there's not going to be smooth times ahead for Legion players, especially new players trying to get into the game and get stuff that they need. That's going to be a big problem. And combining those problems with the fact that they've done very few Legion posts lately. I mean, there was one with the announcement of the ARF Troopers. Of course, you have to make one for a new product. But I look at the ratio of posts and attention that they're giving to Marvel Crisis Protocol and Shatterpoint. And then I look at Legion. I'm like, all right, you're about to relaunch Legion. Shatterpoint's like a 2-year-old game at this point. You're about to relaunch Legion. Is it a 2-year-old game or a 1-year-old game? Did it come out last Adepticon or the Adepticon before that? Anyway, it feels old to me at this point. Because I think last Adepticon they were just doing more previews. And I think it's a 2-year-old game. I should have written that down, the actual date but it's been a long time, is my point. Shatterpoint's not a new game anymore. MCP isn't a new game anymore, but MCP, of course, is still doing well. There's a lot of things that add to that. There's been a lot of new Marvel shows. There's new Marvel movies. Just had Fantastic Four preview. I bet you we're going to see Fantastic Four stuff before too long. Things like that. Marvel Rivals just came out. It's like there's a whole lot of Marvel hype, which is very cool. Star Wars isn't getting as much hype, and they're not doing stuff off of the new stuff right now. So again, Star Wars is a little bit of a lower point. We're in this kind of lull in between big movie seasons, no new trilogies, having trailers come out and stuff like that. So I can get that, but they're relaunching Star Wars Legion under this whole new scheme edition, this whole new banner. Why aren't they doing demos for Legion in stores? Why are they doing demos for Shatterpoint when they should be doing demos for Legion? It shows some favoritism for me, and that's kind of where we combine that favoritism and that sort of that ignorance of Legion with all of the other things that I talked about, and it paints a picture to me that maybe Legion's future is at risk. I don't know. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. And you let me know what you guys think. I know this has been a long video and there's been a lot of rambling because, again, it's stuff that it's largely opinion based. I've been looking at stuff and I know, like, I know the warning signs because I've seen it for 2 other games so far. And, you know, I can kind of see, I've seen Atomic Mass Games' playbook. When they love a game, they can't stop talking about it. Kind of like me, right? You notice I don't talk about Shatterpoint that much. You know, pretty clear how I feel about that game. But I talk about Legion. I talk about Armada. I talk about Warhammer Age of Sigmar a lot. I've been loving that game a lot too. You know, so I love talking about games that I'm passionate about. And I feel like the lack of attention with Legion is, you know, just one additional warning sign to keep, like that little robot picture right there, keep one eye open, a little extra wide. That's my thoughts. Again, let me know if you disagree. I know that I'm prone to rampant speculation based on things, but I've been right an awful lot of times. But I've been wrong sometimes too. I would love to be wrong about Legion. I would love to hear a really strong community address and that outlines a robust reprint schedule and things like Gungans and other new products, along with getting everything into like bigger boxes that are easier for retailers to keep. Hey, here's your catch-up box for Legion. Here's the new starter. Here's your Imperial starter that's got like 8 expansions worth of stuff all in one box, so now you don't have to hunt down all of those. It's all in one box. Here's your Rebel stuff, you know, like things like that, like Battle Force boxes on steroids or something like that. Would be awesome. I'd love to see, you know, like multi-unit boxes. It works for GW. They do that sort of thing all the time. Like, hey, here's this new, you know, Battle Force box, and it's got, like, the Battle Force boxes were a good thing. I don't know why they got rid of those. I hope they come back. I hope there's a lot more entry points for new players. And also, you know, sprinkled in with a healthy amount of new content for Legion. And sprinkled in with some quality attention from AMG. How come you're just doing demos for Shatterpoint? How come you're destroying Legion vehicles? I mean, what did you do to that poor Saber tank? That was the last Saber tank on the planet. And you called it a Shatterpoint terrain piece. I mean, I'm joking a little bit at this point. You know, I'm sure they have a couple in their office that they've earmarked for projects and stuff like that. But there's a little bit of foreshadowing that just, again, when you put all of this stuff together, it's either a pizza pie with lots of toppings or it's a garbage salad that I just made. Let me know what you think it is. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. So say we all. And always wash your socks.